think we underestimate the potential that we have in the industry today with the quality of genetics that we have.
Okay, so that's a statement that's probably going to need some explanation. So today, Ron Scott with Purina is my guest as we jump into a deep discussion on fetal programming. Now, we're going to explore a study done out of North Dakota State University on heifer calves all the way from birth to a calving cow and the correlation between the nutrition, minerals, and vitamins their mamas received and their performance as first-time mamas and their ability then to rebreed.
Because we can really compromise lifetime performance with that first trimester.
Fetal programming. It's a subject that's going to dovetail nicely into last week's episode, but it's a factor we really do need to understand in our effort as ranchers to raising cattle that are profitable for our operations, which means cattle that are maximizing their genetic potential and can stay in the herd longer.
Longevity is the biggest butt whipping we have in the industry.
Fetal programming. It's the framework that powers your genetic potential on this episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. We welcome you here to the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills. We appreciate you tuning in and listening here to the program today. By the way, if you missed something and you want to go back and hear it again, it's pretty simple. You can go to our podcast site at workingranchradio.com or any podcast provider out there. You can download, search Working Ranch Radio Show, and you'll find us out there. By the way, it's always helpful for us, a lot of different reasons for that, but it's helpful if you like a show, if you hear something you like, leave a comment, thumbs up, leave a rating out there. If you're listening on a podcast site, that's helpful, not only for us, so we know kind of what shows you're interested in, but in addition, other folks that might be listening. If they're searching through the different show lists and they see something with a lot of comments on it or a lot of ratings on it, then that helps them as well, so they can maybe tune in and hear the segment or hear the show that you thought was good as well. And as always, if you have questions, comments, even concerns, please feel free. Send me an email. My email address is justin.workingranch@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Well, before we jump into our program here today, just a reminder that later on in the show, the Captain Tim O'Byrne will be in for this week's edition of Tim's Two Cents. And of course, we'll hear from meteorologist Don Day with a look at our long-term weather. Well, joining us on our program here today as we get into this discussion on fetal programming is Ron Scott, Director of Beef Technical Innovation for Purina. And Ron, thanks for joining us here today on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
Thank you, Justin. It's great to be part of this event.
We're going to be talking today about the whole conversation that revolves around fetal programming. And you really have to think back in the last 10 years, there's been a lot of things moving and a lot of studies that have come out in this that are really giving us a basis that this is something we really need to be attentive to.
It's a big deal. It's something that's always been true. It's just that as humans and cattle owners, we tend to take shortcuts, and some of the things that are common sense for what we used to call animal husbandry, sometimes we forget about that. But the big thing today is cattle are dramatically different today than they were 50 years ago and even 20 years ago. And because of that, there are some serious ramifications for performance, profitability, and things like that with something that we call fetal programming or developmental programming. It's very, very real, a very fascinating topic. We've been talking about it for many years, and we always will because it's very important. But there's more data, more information that's coming out and will continue to come out the rest of our lives simply because it's that dramatic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things I've heard talk about too a little bit, and I think you kind of alluded to that a little bit, and we've seen that is our cattle have changed a little bit in the last 50 years, 40 to 50 years, and they continue to keep evolving. And as the genetics have changed, there's really been a focus of, in order to exploit those genetics, it starts with some nutrition. That's got to be a consideration in all of this.
Absolutely. You know, the average cow herd size today is bigger than it used to be, right? Well, nobody really knows how big their cows are because in general, not a lot of ranchers can weigh their cows, right? Some can, but most can't. And that's true everywhere. We have an events at our location at Grace Summit at our Animal Nutrition Center, and I talk about cow herd size, performance, and things like that. And I always ask the question, how many of you weigh your cows? Well, about 25% of them are able to do that. So that kind of makes sense. Mm-hmm. So as cattle producers, so think about this. As cattle producers, we've got a cow herd. It's the most important thing that we have, right? If you have a factory, you know how big it is. You know how many workers are there. But we have cows, and we don't even know how big they are. Well, if you don't know how big your cows are, you don't know how much they eat, and that's because they're out grazing. You don't know the requirements. And so we literally, I think, know the least about I hate to say factory, but cows are factories for us. I mean, they have an output, they produce, and they require inputs. But we really don't know their requirements. We have general ideas. And then every year things change because of moisture, grass production, and things like that. So it's a difficult proposition. So what we want to be able to do as cattle producers is do the best that we possibly can every year with the circumstances that we're faced with.
Mm-hmm. As you talked in general about fetal programming, which we're talking about here today on the program, let's kind of back up a little bit and talk about how that has evolved in terms of the information that we've been able to start to gather and pull together. I look back 10 years ago, some research out of Canada, some research out of Nebraska, some different things that really started to come out and be more publicized as far as what we're seeing with that. Let's go through that and work through up to where we're at now with some generally really what this is about. I think people are understanding. A lot of ranchers probably have heard it enough to kind of understand it. But let's work through that a little bit, because I think that'll set the table for us as we look into where we're at today and its application for today's cow.
You bet. So I'll go through our history with it. And so literally around 2000, so about 25 years ago, is when we first stumbled upon something that was very unique. So we had a rancher that used a liquid supplement on a year-round basis along with the good mineral nutrition program. And then they had increased weaning weights, increased conception rates. And it didn't make sense, right? So they were providing supplement and a vitamin mineral supplement, so protein supplement plus a vitamin mineral supplement in front of their cows 24/7, 365 days a year. And what happened? They had an increase in the weaning weights, right? So not by 5 pounds, we're looking 40 pounds. And the next year they got a similar response. Cows actually ended up consuming less protein supplement when it was out in front of the cows all year long than during a traditional winter feeding season. They say, well, why would that happen? Well, it's because the cows are not catching up, right? Because when do we start supplementing cows? Well, when they look really cold, right? They're all hunched over, and those are tough times for them. Mm-hmm. Well, we should have started supplementing them beforehand. When you supplement cows a little more because they've lost condition, it's too late. They already lost condition, right? And that body fat is like a parka in the wintertime. So body condition keeps those cows warmer, but then cows actually lose more body weight in the wintertime. Why is that? Because they don't have a winter coat on, right? So they're under more stress. So what we found out is that, oh my goodness, something's going on here, because we couldn't explain added performance because of the weather. In other words, it wasn't a good grass year. It's just a normal year. Well, they did it again and saw similar results, a little better than the year before, migrated it to other ranchers. And over time, we just kept seeing, hey, that something's going on. 40, 60, 100 pounds increase in weaning weight. We're talking like results like hybrid vigor. And literally, we were afraid to tell a lot of people because we didn't understand. So then there's some information that came out in Nebraska. It was one of the first research groups that started doing some work on fetal programming, and the whole information and scientific reasoning behind it actually came from humans, because, in the early part of the 1900s, there was a lot of world wars and people were undernourished, and there was information that showed that there was a lot of poor nutrition during different trimesters, and there were different outcomes for kids after they grew up. They had different diseases depending upon which trimester their mother was shorted in nutrition. And that was called the Dutch hunger winter back in around 43, 44 in World War II. So that was one of the big, major pivotal moments that I think the impetus to get some research done in our animals.
Yeah. We're going to take a break here. My guest today is Ron Scott. He is the Director of Beef Technical Innovation with Purina, but we're talking about fetal programming as we prepare and continue to move forward in our cattle cycle as ranchers and in management of that. Just the importance of that. A lot of folks, maybe you've already bred, maybe you're going to be putting bulls out here pretty soon, but understanding where this is all coming into play, because at the end of the day, we are wanting to, either have good, healthy weaned calves that can either be later on in the meat industry or replacements for us. And so how do we make that happen and get the most out of our genetics that we have? That's kind of where this is all tying back to. We're going to take a break here, and when we continue on, we're going to talk more about some of the data and the research on fetal programming when we come back here on the Working Ranch Radio Show. This segment today brought to you by the American Gelbvieh Association. Make your crossbreeding count with Gelbvieh and Balancer Genetics. Find out more at gelbvieh.org.
Capitalize on crossbreeding with Gelbvieh and Balancer bulls. Raise replacement females with added fertility, increased longevity, and greater productivity. Gelbvieh and Balancer influenced females wean more pounds of calf per cow exposed. In the feed yard, Balancer influenced cattle offer increased performance, improved feed efficiency, and have excellent carcass merit. Balancers add the pounds, make the grade, and deliver the value. Make your crossbreeding count with Gelbvieh and Balancer Genetics.
Welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show. My guest today is Ron Scott. We are talking fetal programming, and Ron, as we talked about in the last segment, kind of setting it up as far as where this is becoming a part of our industry. And a lot of that has to do with the research is done, as you had pointed back to 25 years ago, some of the early stuff that you guys began to see. And I want to talk about some more recent studies. I know something that you've been a part of is a study at North Dakota State University. Give us a background of what that is and what you come out of that study knowing.
So first of all, NDSU has an outstanding research group up there doing work in this whole area of developmental programming, fetal programming. And so we've relied on them for their assistance in doing some research. They conducted an additional study on their own. And Jennifer Hurlburt is the author of a study. It was part of her master's thesis. And in that study, what they did is that they took heifers, virgin heifers, synchronized them, bred them all to sexed semen so that all of the calves would be female. Because when you do studies like that, if you have steers and heifers, or I should say bulls and heifers, and you don't have a lot, then it just messes things up in your interpretation. So they took that out of it so that all the offspring would be heifers. And then as soon as they bred them, the ones that it conceived, they were given our wind and rain mineral 7.5 complete. So it's a 7.5 means 7.5% phosphorus, complete plethora of all the traces and vitamins. And so that was fed during gestation for those heifers. The controls did not receive it. The controlled diet was a combination of some silage, a little bit of hay, some distillers and ingredients like that. So when you look at the trace mineral fortification of the control diet, as a nutritionist, I'd say, I don't really see any major problems. So it wasn't something where, okay, you're setting this up because there's poor nutrition to begin with. We'd say it wasn't anything that was awful. And so then what they did is after the heifers, first calf heifers, dropped their calves, then all of the group was fed the same diet. So the only difference in the calf crop was gestational nutrition. And then they kept the calves through weaning and then kept them on through 15 months of age. And what they found, a fascinating thing is that what they found with these first calf heifers is that they produced 1.5 times more colostrum than the controls. So they had 1.5 times more colostrum, not only in volume, but weight. Now the concentration of nutrients in the colostrum is not different. But when you have 1.5 times more colostrum, well, then you're getting more of the goodies, the IgG and things like that are in the colostrum to help those calves to fight off any challenges that they might have with disease. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
And that wasn't on anybody's radar. So on their radar, because they measured it, right? It's not on a cow-calf person's radar to think, hey, if I don't have good quality nutrition out there, am I going to sacrifice colostrum? And is colostrum on anybody's radar in the cow-calf industry? Many times it's not. It's just part of it. Well, colostrum's a big deal. The data from the dairy side would suggest it's starting to be produced about 2 months, 1 month before calving. So it's a process. It's just not like, okay, here's colostrum. Mm-hmm. It's a process to manufacture it. Mm-hmm. Then after those calves, there's no difference in health outcomes in the calves. At weaning, the calves were 36 pounds heavier that were on their mamas were on wind and rain mineral during gestation. 36 pounds. Mm. They had bigger ribeye areas, bigger chest circumference, bigger abdominal circumference. So we're building a better replacement female, if you will. Then they kept them after weaning, and at 15 months of age, which would be time for them to get bred. At 15 months of age, that 36-pound advantage was still there. So what does that mean? It means the control calves did not catch up. Why did they not catch up? They can't. They're a different calf. They were created differently before they were born. Mm-hmm. And that's what fetal programming is. That's what it does. It creates a set point if you have high stress and poor nutrition. You just can't overcome something if you don't have the machinery. I liken this to if we build a house and you run out of screws and nails, you still build your frame, you still have a house, still looks okay, but under stress, it's coming down. You can't tell that, but it will. Mm-hmm. The same thing that was happening here. Every trimester, everything's broken down into trimesters, every 3-month periods. So the first trimester, second and third trimester, the different organs are being created. The first trimester, we've got heart, lung, liver, spleen, etc. We're building a frame, starting a little bit with muscle development. But if those organs are not created to their, let's say, optimal potential, well, there's a set point on them. They're stunted, if you will, right? And then that limits our production after a calf is born. The second trimester is more of that, what's called differentiation curves, to create better enzyme systems. We did some work with NDSU on the first trimester nutrition, looking at mineral supplementation. Oh my goodness. So all of these enzyme systems, protein expression, creating an individual, all of that is initiated the first trimester. So when we first started out with thinking through fetal programming, people would ask me, well, what's the most important trimester? Is it first? Is it the second or the third? And I always responded, well, we don't really know. It's kind of like someone asking me which one's my favorite child. Mm-hmm. Well, they all are, right?
Yeah. They're different.
They're different. Yeah, each one's different. So today I'd say it really might be the first one, because we can really compromise lifetime performance with that first trimester. And that's kind of what this study indicates.
Mm-hmm. Well, and even in some of the information that I had read through there is, as you had said, each of those gestations, it's important. You can say in this case, what we're talking about, that first trimester is an important point in time. And one of the things that made sense to me was the fact that if the focus for that embryo is to be growing those things, and there's not enough mineral nutrients or nutrients in that cow's body, then the muscle fibers that need to also be starting to potentially to be built, those aren't taking place either. And that building of those muscle fibers is, whether you're looking at, let's take somebody that's a terminal operation, they're wanting high weaning weights. They're wanting a lot of production out of that animal. And if we don't have a framework, as you've mentioned there, to build it on, it's going to be minimal. And so it's, as you said, I think a good point you mentioned was it's kind of a backstop there. You're starting with a good frame that a cow that does not have that nutrition that embryo just flat will not have.
Yeah, bullseye. And so that first trimester, if you think about reproduction, that's where the ovarian reserve is created. So you're starting to create this female first trimester for replacement efforts. And all that stuff's terrible. Mm-hmm. I think we underestimate the potential that we have in the industry today with the quality of genetics that we have. And I think this study shows that. And so what do I mean by that? Well, if you look at the second trimester and the third trimester, that's where most of our muscle cells are created, and then they grow. So when a calf is born, they're born with the number of muscle cells they'll have. Now, I'm not the heaviest muscle person in the world. I have friends of the same age, come from different genetics, and they got a lot more muscle. Well, why is that? It's genetics. You're not going to change genetics. Now, after an animal is born, you can change genetic expression. We give implants, help those calves respawn. But if you have poor nutrition during gestation, you're going to compromise ribeye. You're going to compromise muscle. And we don't recognize that. And here's why. Today, if cows don't have what I would call the best possible nutrition, but it's good, nobody knows what they're giving up because cattle perform so much better than they used to. Your winning weights just say, well, they're great. Well, guess what? If we'd have better nutrition, they can actually respond and that can be improved. And that's what the data from North Dakota State shows. You've got good cattle, good weaning weights, but here's better nutrition through the mineral supplementation. And oh my goodness, that's 36 pounds more weaning weight. It's huge. Let's say for easy math, if it's 30 pounds, $3 a pound, that's $90. And then if we've got replacement heifers, I got a better chance of getting her bred because she's going to be bigger at breeding time. It all kind of goes hand in hand.
Well, and it does, and it kind of goes hand in hand with our subject that we had last week. I was talking with Carla Wilkie with the University of Nebraska regarding how to get that elusive second calf, because we have too many cows that are falling out of our herd. Lack of longevity is a huge cost to our industry, and cows not getting past the 3 to 4 calves. And I think if we can get past that mark, there's some things like this that we're talking about here today that help and coincide with that. Let's take a break here, Ron. We can continue talking a little bit more about the longevity thing because I think that's something that probably you can add some comments to that. We're going to continue on. Ron Scott is my guest today, Director of Beef Technical Innovation with Purina. We're talking about fetal programming, its importance with our management of our cattle. And I still have some questions in this. I think one of the things that's probably also in the back of some folks' mind, especially in my case, is, okay, but how much is enough? How much is too much? And some things like that, because we also want to make sure that we're not going overboard and doing something that is over the top and we're not getting a good return on investment. That's really what it's about at the end of the day. So we're going to take a break here and return back on the Working Ranch Radio Show. Before we go, this segment today brought to you by Cowpuncher Coffee. You know, it's what we drink right here at the X-Ring Ranch and at the Working Ranch Radio Show studios. You know, the essence of craft coffee lies in the beans and the skill of the master. They say that is a fact, and that's what you'll find with Cowpuncher Coffee. You can choose from several different varieties and flavors of coffee. I'll tell you what, if you give Jim or Tricia a call, should you have questions, they'll hook you up on what they think might work for you, or you can also just check them out online and order right from their website as well at cowpunchercoffee.com. Grab a mug, let's spur the day with Cowpuncher Coffee.
What if your commercial beef herd could be better than you thought possible? Genetic testing can help give you more confidence about what your herd is made of, and more importantly, what it can be. Inherit Select from Zoetis provides data-driven genetic insights to help you make more informed selection, breeding, and culling decisions about your cows and heifers. The journey from genetic potential to reality begins with Inherit Select. Ask a genetics rep how to save on testing with our whole herd promotion. Go to beefgenetics.com/radio.
Welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show. My guest today is Ron Scott. We're talking fetal programming, and before the break, we had just kind of dabbled into the subject and talking a little bit about longevity and getting these cows to stay longer in our herd. As I had alluded to in at break, Ron and I were talking a little bit about, I feel that just not getting more years out of the average cow in our country, I think that's one of the biggest cost factors that we have in our cattle herd and profitability factors that we have as ranchers. And I don't think we really are fair, and I don't think we're honest with ourselves when we realize if we start with 100 head, how many do we have after 3.5 years? And that's spooky when you realize the investment, especially now where you're paying $3,500 a pair or $3,500 for a bred animal. So, Ron, with that in mind, the nutritional part of this just plays kind of into that, because that's giving that animal that framework to get a good start and to continue later in life.
You bet. You bet. When I started with Purina 32 years ago, one thing that I learned was the 4 square philosophy. So what is that? Well, you got 4 legs of a chair, gives the because stability, the 4 legs for us in the animal industry are genetics, health, management, and nutrition. And that was true back then. It's true today and always will be true. So if any of those are lacking, then we're going to have problems. And we find that out. We're trying to get a first calf heifer rebred. And then we find out getting that second calf cow rebred. And then we find out she's got her third calf. And if you lose her at any point in there, she has not paid for herself. And guess what? It happens every day. Mm-hmm. We had the problem with that with our research herd. And so we decided what we would do is practice what we recommended to our customers, the 4 square philosophy. So we began selecting differently. We selected heifers that were born from dams who conceived on first service conception. Why did we do that? It's heritable. Mm-hmm. It's heritable, number 1. Number 2, we decided we needed to make sure that we separated those heifers when they were having their second calf still. Keep them away from the cows. We need to feed them differently. They're still growing. We forget that these cattle are still growing. And the most important thing for them is not getting rebred. The calf on the ground is more important than getting rebred, because this is something that's part of lactation and things. So getting rebred is low priority for that cow, because guess what? She has high requirements, and if they're not there, it doesn't matter. And then genetically, if you don't have right genetics, they haven't selected for that, then it makes it even lower. So what we've been doing is developing our heifers. We've got vitamin and mineral nutrition, so supplement in front of them every day of their lives. It's not an option. We develop them to gain around 1.5 pounds a day. We have the advantage that we can weigh them. So if you can't weigh your cattle, can't weigh your developing heifers, what do? Well, you monitor body condition. Make sure that there's some uniformity and you're covering that. After that heifer drops that calf, we've got them on one of our Purina supplements. We monitor our body condition. Typically, we develop on a product called AccuRation. They drop the calf, then we move on to an AccuRation high-fat block and our mineral supplement. So we've got the supplement in front of them to ensure that they can gain weight, continue to grow. And then after she drops her calf, so she gets rebred, and then she's going to have a second calf, right? After she weans her second calf, only then do we turn her into our mature cow herd. So we treat each 3 of those groups separately. Mm-hmm. And since we've been doing that, our reproductive performance is rock star. We have a 60-day breeding season. We use seeders, and we use artificial insemination, and we do great. We get 90% of our first calf heifers rebred.
Mm-hmm. Ron, I want to look at this from a range cow type of setup here, because I think there's guys, we got a pretty good chunk of listeners probably listening too that say, well, I don't know that I'm going to put a block out there, a supplement or a protein block out there 7 days a week, 365. And I think, and we can talk about this maybe in the next segment, we can get into the cost analysis of some of this. But when we look at this, one of the things that I come back to is, I think the mineral side of things, 7 days a week, 365, that's something that has probably, as I've talked, and not just folks trying to sell me mineral, but just old timers. When they look back on their years of being ranchers, that they've talked about that mineral has probably been more productive to their management operation and their cattle, and having that in front of those cows consistently, rather than maybe the old mindset of, well, let's hit them a couple times a year. That's something that's really changed in a lot of this and plays into this whole thing of fetal programming and providing that basis within that cow.
That's right. As a general statement, no matter where you are, your forage is deficient relative to cow requirements. And it's more true now than it has ever been, because our cows are bigger. So today our cows weigh approximately 1,400 pounds versus 40 years ago an 1,000-pound cow. So she's 1.4 times as big. Well, guess what? Don't you think she would have higher requirements than a 1,000-pound cow? Absolutely, right? And we forget that. The other problem that we have, and it goes back to why we have some challenges on reproduction. So cows are basically 40% bigger than they were 40 years ago. Did everybody go out and buy 40% more land to run the same number of cows? No. People are running out of grass, and we don't recognize that. And we expect them to be in good body condition, and we expect them to be profitable. Well, if they don't get bred, they're not profitable. So really, really like to challenge everybody to try to figure out do you have the right stocking density for your land? Are you overstocked?
Mm-hmm.
Monitor your body condition throughout the year. It's very evident that with the cow herd today that we have in the U.S., we have a very, very high performing herd, which is why we've got outstanding performance at the feed yard, and why we produce so much more beef on fewer cows. Why is that? Well, cattle gain faster. If they gain faster and grow faster and bigger, they have higher requirements. That cow herd needs vitamin, mineral supplementation every day. It's not an option anymore. Longevity is the biggest butt whipping we have in the industry, right? Other species, they know what longevity is. Our longevity, if you're running things right, is if you don't give your cow bred, she's gone, right? And if we can have a cow for 8 years, we can make money. Sometimes we'll have cows that are 14 years old and still weaning a very good high percentage of their body weight. Another problem that we have with our cow herd is bigger cows wean a lower percentage of their body weight. So think about this. I got a 1,000-pound cow. Would it be unbelievable if she weaned off a 500-pound calf? No, we've seen that. So that's 50% of her body weight. If I got an 1,800-pound cow, is she going to wean a 900-pound calf? No. So these bigger cows are not as efficient. They are not as efficient. We select, and we tell everybody to, you select for age and weight on your replacement heifers. And we're paid for what? Pounds. So cow size will continue to increase. I don't know when it's going to stop, but that's our incentive is pounds. So why would we stop? The only reason why we stop is our cows too big and they're not efficient.
Yeah. Let's take another break here, Ron, and I want to continue on that. I want to talk a little bit more about the cow size and cow environment because I think it correlates to some of our conversation here. I know I've got a lot of folks that listen to this that are looking at the mindset of we need to scale our cattle down a little bit. And so I want to continue to talk more about that conversation when we come back here on the Working Ranch Radio Show. This segment today brought to you by K-Line Irrigation. It's a cost-effective, adaptive irrigation solution designed specifically with the grass-based livestock producer in mind. Find out more at k-linena.com.
This year, choose to unlock the full potential of your cattle operation with K-Line Irrigation, the affordable and dynamic solution for grass-based livestock operations. Beat drought by planning ahead with the most user-friendly irrigation system. K-Line systems ensure optimal water distribution across all acres and are unencumbered by obstacles such as fence lines or steep terrain. Don't miss out on untapped pasture potential. Choose K-Line to secure the future of your grazing operation. For more information, visit our website at www.k-linena.com. Be sure to fill out a consultation form so our designers can create an estimate for your project. K-Line Irrigation, for greener, more productive pastures anywhere.
Welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show. My guest today is Ron Scott. He is the Director of Beef Technical Innovation with Purina. We're talking about fetal programming, but we've really talked just nutrition and a lot of different things that play into this. And Ron, I appreciate your insight. I told you at break, I said you kind of caught me off guard a little bit because I thought you were going and really promoting these big cows, and then you kind of blindsided me with something I agree with, and the fact that we do have cattle in our industry that are way too big, that are not really efficient. When we look at the scheme of things, in reality, if we're going to put a pencil and we're going to really run the calculator, some of these big cows are not efficient. They just flat are not there. And we as an industry have to understand that. And so when we come into this, as we were talking before the break, it really comes down to how do we be efficient with what we've got? We've got great genetics. You've already talked about that. Let's lay a foundation in these cattle. That's the fetal programming that we talked about. But we've got to be efficient with what we have.
Absolutely. And I think that efficiency is something that it's hard to get your hands around unless you are able to weigh your cows. And not many people can do that. So what can you do? Well, if we all have cull cows. We can eyeball our cull cows in the chute body condition and get an idea about how big our cow herd might be. And that's really important. I think the challenge that we have, if we agree that the smaller cows are more efficient, well, what is a smaller cow? Well, a smaller cow today is not a 1,000-pound cow. So, a smaller cow today is 1,200 to 1,400 pounds. Well, she's plenty big. But our problem is, let's say I decide, okay, I think my cows weigh 16 to 1,800 pounds. I think they're too big. Well, how do you change that? So what you have to do is figure out what's the right size for my operation. How much land do I have? How much grass, rainfall, what's going on? We do know this, that proper nutrition, low stress, good management is going to create a better replacement heifer. And that heifer can get rebred and she can have more longevity. So that investment up front is going to pay off. And so those smaller cows can be more efficient and get bred where there might be some concerns on some of these bigger cows. So it can pay off, and it does. It does. You know, here's an interesting thing. When I started with the company, cattle producers weren't very upset if their cows were not consuming enough mineral because they're saving money. They're not eating the mineral. I'm saving money. Well, today, a lot of our producers, they want their cattle to eat mineral because they know what it does. It's a big deal. I want to point out it's vitamins and minerals in that package that they're putting out for their cows. It's both. It's both.
I want to really quickly hit, before we kind of wrap this up and start getting into what I talked about at break, then telling you that I'm kind of a low input guy, so I'm going to kind of hairs raise a little bit when we talk about having to spend more money. So, but I want to hit one other real subject real quick, and that is more is not better. We kind of talked a little bit about that, about cow size, a bit about that, but let's even talk about nutrition. I mean, overweight cows, that's as bad as going the other way.
Yep. So your nutrition program, you know, we know how cows are doing by their body condition. That's our barometer. So the key thing that we have, how do we get there? How do we keep them in consistent condition? Y'all threw this out. What we've found in our supplementation program, so we have folks that literally have had a protein supplement in a wind rain mineral for their cows 365 days a year. And you think those cows are going to get fat. They don't get fat. And the reason why is in those times in the springtime and summer, they're just not eating very much supplement. So they're getting in a uniform plane of nutrition. They're getting the nutrients they need for fetal development for those calves during those first and second trimesters. So if we have protein supplement out there at that time, and if we have our vitamin mineral supplement out like wind and rain, guess what? Then we get those additional nutrients, because I can guarantee us that those cows are deficient. Even though you take a sample of grass, man, it's rock star. Well, if they can't eat enough, it doesn't matter. It needs help. So providing supplement during what I'd call non-traditional times actually makes sense, because we've got a cow herd that responds to that. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
I was always on the side of the fence of low input. And that does make sense depending upon your management style that you have. But today, because our cows respond so much better to nutrition, to management, then we probably need to rethink some of the things that we're doing on the management side on how we feed our cows. You know, the importance of tightening up the breeding season. That's huge for us for reproductive performance, let alone weaning weight.
Yeah.
So here's what. If you miss a heat cycle, what's that worth? Well, 21
20
days.
30 pounds or more.
Yep. Well, weight per day of age around 2 pounds a head. That's 40 pounds. You miss a heat cycle, 40 pounds times $3, that's $120. Oh my goodness. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Big deal.
Ron, as we kind of wrap up here, as we were talking fetal programming, and I think a lot of us can say, okay, I get it. I think that's important. We know that the foundation that's enhancing the genetics that we already have. And so we see the importance of that. But as I told you before the break, you know, I'm kind of a low input outfit, and I believe in having mineral in front of everything. You know, I've tried to run from a management standpoint that we're calving more in sync with nature, so that we're not having to provide a lot of feed in the middle of winter, and do it and use naturally what's out there. So from that standpoint, I know you talked a little bit about it in your last answer here. We got to make this meet in the middle here. Are we getting that return out of there? I think that's the essence that we got to get back to on this, is that even in years where we're not selling calves for $3 a pound, and years where we're selling them for $1.86 a pound, this has all got to come together. And so how do we make this meet so we're not pouring money down the drain here, but it's going to make sense financially, production-wise, profitability-wise?
You bet. So I would say at a high level, it's going to pay every year. And the reason why is that whenever you look at the investments that you have in your cow herd, you need to look at the long term, because 1 year can really mess up a herd. So what's my example? So we've had events my entire career where we bring in cattle producers from across the U.S. We have an event where we bring in ranchers who have a lot of cows, thousands of cows, takes them a month to wean, big guys. And I always ask them to say, is there a year where it's a poor rainfall year, kind of a drought, and you follow up the calf crop from that year, replacement heifers, and you wish that you never kept any one of them because they're duds? And is there a group of cows that came from the herd where it was a good grass year, the year before they were born, and they all shake their head, right? So if during a drought year, so that's like a not investing in your cows because we don't have grass, right? You get replacement heifers that become cows that you wish you never had, right? So that's a very good example of the value of fetal programming, the dramatic contrast between two groups of females on the same herd just by different years. And all of our large ranchers have been able to see that. Mm-hmm. Well, so a low input producer would kind of be like that. So we want to be able to produce good cattle all the time so that when the market is such to where we get the up in the market, I can take advantage of that. I can't take advantage of that if my genetics have been stunted because of some decisions that I made. I think because of efficiency and the rebreeding efficiency, longevity for service conception, it's going to pay for itself. It's going to pay for itself.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good comment to finish on there, Ron. I appreciate you joining us here. A lot of deep thinking here that I'm going through as you're talking through this. I know folks that are listening, it'd be one of these shows that luckily if you're listening on a podcast, you can hit the pause button and rewind 30 seconds and listen to it again here. So if folks would like some more information or have some questions, is there a place they can reach out to do that?
Sure. So my name is Ron Scott, and I've got an email. It's rscott@landolakes.com. Greenville by Lambda Lakes. And then we've got local folks that certainly can help. And definitely, if you're thinking about this whole thought process on what does it cost per minute, how much is that going to be per year, get with our local folks. They'll run scenarios over with you, and so that you can kind of understand, okay, what's my out-of-pocket cost? The other thing I tell folks, especially those who have a lot of cattle, just try it on some of your herd, right? See what happens. But don't forget, don't mess up your replacement heifers. Make sure that you give them top-notch nutrition, and I don't think it's an option for them not to receive good vitamin and mineral nutrition program, because if they don't have it and they don't get rebred, you've lost all that investment.
Yep. It's pretty costly.
Yeah.
All right, Ron, thanks for joining us here again on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
You're very welcome, Justin. Thanks for having me. Take care.
You bet. And again, Ron Scott, Director of Beef Technical Innovations with Purina, my guest here today. A deep dive as we're talking about fetal programming, a lot to think through, a lot to think about as we look at that and to put into context with your own operation and how you view your management of your cow operation. I think it really goes hand in hand, as I said earlier, with our show last week with Carla Wilkie with the University of Nebraska, as we were talking about getting that second calf out of these cows. And when it comes down to it, I'm going to say it again. I said it already a couple times in this show and in last week's show, longevity. Lack of longevity is a big profit killer in our cattle, in our ranching industry. And if we can just get 2 more calves out of these cows, I think we can see a lot of profit start to build in our own ranching operations. So with that, let's take a break here. When we come back, the Captain Tim O'Byrne will be in for this week's edition of Tim's 2 Cents. And of course, we'll hear from meteorologist Don Day with a look at our long-term weather.
Looking for the perfect gift for a gardener or weather enthusiast? Introducing the Tropo, a precision rain gauge that has revolutionized both reliability and convenience. Expertly engineered by meteorologists, the Tropo gauge boasts rugged durability, impeccable accuracy, and precision to the 100th of an inch. Visit measurerain.com to order a Tropo today and use code RAINDAY. That's RAINDAY for free shipping and 10% off. Go to measurerain.com.
Hey, Justin. Hey, everybody out there in Working Ranch Radio Land. Just a quick update on the bird flu issue here. This is from the Columbus Dispatch newspaper in Ohio. 5 cows in the United States have been infected and died from bird flu or slaughtered because they did not recover, Reuters reports. Bird flu, also known as avian influenza or H5N1, refers to the disease caused by infection from influenza type A viruses. This virus spreads among wild aquatic birds and can infect domestic poultry and other bird and animal species, which is what's happening today. Animals from more than 80 dairy cow herds across 10 states have contracted bird flu since late March, according to the USDA. Cows in Ohio, along with South Dakota, Michigan, Texas, and Colorado have died from bird flu. Most cows in Ohio and other states have died from secondary infections after having bird flu, according to Reuters. Most cows affected by bird flu recover well, a USDA spokesperson said. Now, is it safe to eat beef? Is store-bought meat safe? The USDA reported bird flu particles in the beef tissue of one slaughtered dairy cow, and it was not sent to the food supply. Experiments have shown that meat injected with the bird flu virus was not found with it after being cooked to medium up to well done. So far, bird flu has not been found in stores. All right, so folks, let's keep an eye out for this. We've got our people definitely on it, researchers watching it, USDA's on it. And Justin, you'll keep us updated as this important zoonotic change evolves. Back to you in the booth.
All right, thanks, Captain. And yeah, I think for all of us in the beef industry, I think we really need to be watching this because to me, while this is serious, and I don't want to, by no means am I trying to make light of or how important it is and its effect in our industry as a whole, our beef industry, our cattle industry, there are other diseases out there that could be way more impactful to our beef industry. And I think how this is handled could dictate how those are handled. And I think that's one of the things that as I'm watching this play out, it's one of the things in the back of my mind. I think it's something we all need to be thinking about. Well, as we turn the subject here a little bit away from that, let's turn and take a look at our long-term weather. Meteorologist Don Day is standing by. Don, overall across the country, we do see a lot of moving parts, and those moving parts from the jet stream up north to heat in the Gulf really is going to be conducive to creating some weather situations as we look more long term.
Yeah, what's going to happen here over the next week is we're going to see quite the difference in temperature across the nation. You're going to be hearing about on the news some real big heat developing in parts of the eastern U.S., the New England area, parts of the Great Lakes are going to have the hottest temperatures of the year so far. At the same time that happens, we're going to see some unseasonably cool weather come into the western half of the U.S. I mean, we're looking at temperatures well below average for the Pacific Northwest, the Northern Rockies, the Northern Plains, Southwest Canada. And that coolness will even get down into places like Las Vegas, even into the desert states. So we're going to see, depending on where you are, if you listen to the East Coast media, the world is on fire. If you listen to the West Coast or the middle of the nation media, will say, well, when is it going to warm up? So we're going to have a really big contrast. And a lot of that has to do with a very active jet stream still. It's being a lot more busy than it usually is here towards the middle of June. And when you get these low pressure systems that come into the West like this time of year, the way the wind patterns work is it brings heat from the deserts and the Gulf far northward into the Great Lakes in New England, while you have that colder than average weather come into the West. So it really is going to depend on where you are across the nation. And you mentioned the Gulf. It is heating up in terms of tropical activity. Some of you may have been hearing about the heavy rains in Florida. We've seen a lot of thunderstorm activity in the Gulf region. That's going to get itself organized into a tropical disturbance that could bring some heavy rains to eastern Mexico and parts of the Gulf Coast by mid to late next week.
Is there any areas of the country that you're concerned about?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, we have some pockets of some really dry conditions that have developed this spring. Portions of eastern Wyoming, pockets of western Nebraska, some areas of central South Dakota. Those areas have missed out on a lot of the spring moisture. Also, we talked a lot about that Interstate 70 corridor, parts of southeastern Colorado, western Kansas. Those areas are still dry, but they have benefited recently for some pretty good coverage. There's some really good rain-producing showers and thunderstorms. But there are, I would say there are islands where conditions are still really dry, especially in parts of the western high plains. Also, west of the divide, on the western slope of Colorado, back into Utah, Nevada, and Arizona, it's been really dry. Now, it's not unusual at all for those areas west of the divide to be dry during the first part of June because you're waiting for that summer monsoon to get started. But they really didn't see much May precipitation either. So those are the areas that I'm concerned about in terms of dryness. We still have drought conditions in far southern New Mexico, parts of far west and southwest Texas. If you look at the latest drought monitor, many areas of Kansas are still dry, but those areas should have some chances of precipitation. So we've got islands of dryness and islands where it's real wet. I mean, the northern plains look wet. I think Montana and parts of the Pacific Northwest could get some good rains over the next 7 days.
You had mentioned briefly about the summer monsoon, waiting for that to happen. I know we're a little ways off from that really going into full bore activity. However, what are you seeing? How are you envisioning that to maybe play out this summer?
Well, it certainly looks like it's going to be a below average monsoon season in terms of rain output. And this is really critical for Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and then part of the adjacent high plains in those areas, especially when you look at the Four Corners and the western slopes of the Rockies. And the reason for that is we've had cooler than average sea surface temperatures off the coast of Mexico, the Baja Peninsula in particular. Those temperatures have started with a deficit, and we need them to warm up. And they're warming up, but they still got a ways to go. The one positive we see, we talked about the Gulf of Mexico starting to get active with tropical activity. Well, a lot of times this time of year, it seems counterintuitive, but as high pressure builds over North America and the jet stream goes more north, that allows a lot of the circulation with the wind patterns to take Gulf of Mexico storminess and push it westward into Mexico and parts of Texas. And some of that moisture can work its way all the way into the desert Southwest if conditions are right. And that's something that I think in a couple of weeks, about 2 weeks from where we're talking now, I think the southwestern United States will start to see those showers and thunderstorms finally begin to move in. About 2 weeks late, but they'll finally get started.
Okay. All right. Well, that gives us an idea of what we could be looking for. I know this time of the year, as it starts to get a little bit warmer, we do like to see some moisture coming off and on with that. And so I know at the same time, things are firing up in the hay fields and they're getting going on that. So the rain is kind of a double-edged sword, but at the end of the day, we do need the moisture. So.
Well, you know how it goes with rain. It never comes at the right time or at the right amount, no matter what you do.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Don, thanks for joining us here this morning.
Thank you.
And that is meteorologist Don Day with a look at our long-term weather. If you want to stay clued in each and every morning what is going on with the weather outlook across the country, you can tune in to his daily video podcast at dayweather.com and find out and get to his YouTube channel from there. We'll be back, wrap up this week's show after this. If you haven't had an opportunity to get through your latest issue of Working Ranch magazine, you're not going to be disappointed. Chock full of great stories and articles, as it always is. And if you don't have a subscription, two things. Number one, you're missing out. Number two, it's pretty easy to get started by going to workingranchmag.com. Well, thanks to our sponsors of the Working Ranch Radio Show, K-Line Irrigation, American Gelbvieh Association, Inherent Select from Zoetis, and Cowpuncher Coffee. The Working Ranch Radio Show is a production of Working Ranch Magazine, branded #1 by America's Ranchers. My email address, if you'd like to get a hold of me, you can send me an email at justin.workingranch@gmail.com. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Justin Mills. And until next time, keep your chin down and your mind in the middle. So long.